Hi everyone, Sean Healy, NLP trainer and change agent here, and you're watching the Sean Healy Relationship Resourcing Series. I'm here with my friend PJ today, who's an optimization coach and NLP master practitioner, and today's topic that we'll be talking about is breakup post-relationships. I've forgotten the title already. What were we doing?
I believe it was recovery post-toxic relationship.
There you go. Recovery post-toxic relationship. That's our discussion for today.
Recovery post-toxic relationship breakup works too.
Pulling yourself together after things went bad, you know. So yeah, that's going to be our topic for today. How do we recover after a really horrendous relational experience? Because recovery from a toxic, abusive dynamic is not the same as recovering from a moderately or fairly healthy relationship that didn't work out. So we wanted to sort of talk about how some of that process is different and some of the ways in which and things you're going to come up against in the recovery journey. So thanks PJ, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, another one of our conversation series. Where do we begin? What kind of stuff do we want to start with when we're talking about, you and I were talking earlier about this before we started filming, perhaps beginning with what are the differences between coming out of a really toxic dynamic compared to it didn't work out so much, we've got different interests or something like that, something a bit milder.
Yeah. I think it's a great place to start because they do feel very different, and but the concern that I have, having been out of both a toxic and a healthy breakup, is that they get treated the same way, and by well-meaning support networks, be it family, friends, even counsellors or professionals you might see, may not pick up on that, and truthfully they really need different approaches for healthy and full recovery. And we'll reverse engineer this, it seems, because when generally you come out of a healthy relationship, there needs to be acknowledgement and peace made with the part you play, the part the other plays, and taking equal share of responsibility, and generally a sense of closure. And sometimes that plays out in the way that you may have further conversations with that person. You may have some joint counselling. You may just sort of bring some sort of a natural close to the relationship, be it exchanging final words or whatever it may be. And when you're dealing with the breakup and processing it, generally there's equal share of responsibility that you take to close it off and recover from it. Whereas with a toxic relationship, it's really unhealthy in my view to do that, because you've spent the entire relationship, generally by the time you're out of it, if you're lucky enough to be, taking 90% of the responsibility. And one of the trademarks, and I'm sure we'll go into this somewhere else, of coming out of a toxic relationship is that there is no closure. There will never be any closure, and that's part of the recognition that it was a toxic ending. And so those are some of the reasons why I think they deserve different approaches. We need to be really careful when we're recovering, just to check in to see where we're at and what really needs to be there for us to become healthier and whole and recover and reorientate. So I'll hand over to you.
I like that. I think for me, as you say, having had experiences of coming out of both, coming out of a highly toxic dynamic, I think the amount of repair and recovery is considerably different, because when you come out of a toxic relationship, often effectively your self-esteem is just absolutely smashed.
You don't know which way is up.
Yeah, don't know which way is up. I remember, and we've talked about this before, like a day or so after the end of the toxic relationship, literally being frozen when somebody asked me in a store what kind of bread I wanted, and then trying to figure out, what choice I was going to make that wasn't going to end in me getting in trouble and eviscerated, and then suddenly going, hang on a moment, it's just me. So, if our thinking and our esteeming and our energy levels and all these things have been run into the ground, there's going to be multiple areas of repair that are going to need to be built back, let alone, the trust in self, the trust in other people, and this can take a considerable amount of time. It's took years longer to get in a place of being able to get myself back to what I would consider my pre-traumatic relationship kind of space, compared to, that was a significant difference compared to in other relationships that didn't work out. They weren't necessarily fabulously healthy either, but the gap between that relationship and the next one starting, and my willingness to be in relationship again, whereas coming out of the abusive dynamic, I was almost relationship phobic. I didn't want to have anything to do, and I couldn't fathom that anyone would, because you're so deep in the shame, and you're made to, feel so incredibly wrong that you can't fathom getting into another relationship, let alone, getting back on the track of effective self-care, getting back into exercise, eating well, seeking out the kind of effective counselling and support you need. So it's you really are starting from, here we were in a relationship, it broke down, so, a reasonably healthy thing, and I'm, yes, I'm low and I'm sad and I might have grief and all that kind of stuff, but compared to something that's been eviscerating and highly abusive, then, there's a long way potentially back for some of us, and giving ourselves the time, and as PJ said, getting the right kind of support is so vital. You need somebody who understands considerably the difference in those dynamics and how to hold space for you. So.
Absolutely, and one of the things that caught my attention as you were describing the confidence in self, and when you were in the bread store, and that self-trust, and there's really good reasons behind these symptoms, because there's really predictable ways that the toxic people play out, what they do to get whatever result they're after. But these are just the effects of very specific tactics, if you will, and the sense of trust and self being shaken is a real important one, because not only is the sense of trust and self threatened, but the baseline is not there. So because perhaps in the toxic dynamic, right was wrong and wrong was right, but then sometimes right was right and wrong was wrong, and sometimes nothing was right and everything was wrong, and sometimes everything was right and nothing was wrong. And so there's no solid ground to hold on to know what would have a certain response or another. So that the consequence of that is an anxiety around having an opinion, or having making a stand or a choice, or speaking out, because it may be right, may be wrong, depending on the day, and if it's Tuesday, it may be correct, and if it's Wednesday, it might not be, and that causes that disorientation, and eventually wears down not only the self-esteem, the confidence, but also the inability to self-regulate and to predict, and that unpredictability creates a lot of anxiety. And so I think it's important to recognize that the symptoms you have are very specific and very predictable, and generally, if you have an expert, and this is why getting an expert who specializes in recovery for specifically toxic relationships, it's important because they will almost be able to guess some of the situations you may have been in and some of the ways in which interactions may have played out based on how strongly you show certain symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I thought that was definitely an interesting one, because some would argue, oh yeah, but of course you're going to be a bit down about your self-esteem after a breakup, or lack confidence, or become emotional, and if you have always had a partner and you bounce things off each other, it's very different to lose your ability to make simple life decisions, and that's definitely effects of having your boundaries crossed and your internal navigation system tampered with.
So I like that a lot. I think because if you remember, if you've been with a partner who actually had no interest in you being stable, in you being grounded, because that would have made it harder for you to be controlled. So that somebody who incessantly talks about what acting in your best interests while clearly isn't, while is making sure that, as you say, the goalposts are constantly moving, what's right and wrong is constantly moving, and always keeping you on the back foot and to a degree unstable, because for what purpose? Well, you're easier to control if we're doing those kinds of things. So coming back into a place where we can start to get a sense of stability and groundedness within ourselves, this can take time, and at the same time, what you might find is, depending on, the level of threat to your safety, as well as trying to get out of the relationship, you still might be managing the very real threat to your safety. So, if you've got to take steps to make sure that you're safe at the same time, so there's that extra bit to juggle. If you find that the abusive person has no interest in letting you go, so they're contacting your place of work 30 times a day, they're showing up where they want to be. If it's if it's a relationship that just didn't work out, then you're not going to be hunted, so to speak, by your ex-partner. By comparison to someone who sees that they're entitled to possess you, and that your choice to move away from them is an absolute affront, then you've got to juggle also the sense that actually you might find that the dynamics have gotten worse since you left the relationship. That can be a key thing. And as PJ said, dealing with people who really don't understand what's going on for you, especially if they were skilled enough to convey the good guy, good girl kind of public persona, and was able to keep all the abusiveness behind closed doors, so that only you got to see the real horrendous nature and the depths of how toxic they could be, and everyone else, including your family members, are going, no, it's impossible. That's really hard to kind of, when your compass has already been thrown off, and then the people that are meant to love, support, and adore you are also the ones that are championing the abuser. And you have to be ready, because that can really be shocking when you go to your family or your friends and you expect unmitigated support, and instead what you get is people who don't have full access to the situation, don't understand how calculated some of the abuse dynamics can be, and they're busy saying to you, hey, no, they're a good person. At least they got a job. At least they take care of you. I'm sure it's not as bad as you think. You just need to talk it through. All these well-intentioned things that just simply do not apply when we're talking about highly toxic, highly abusive dynamics. So that too can be pretty confronting when Sometimes we have to talk to people about the kind of support we want. I don't want you to think for me. I don't want you to get outraged because you hijack my ability to sing in my feelings. Here's what I need from you. And unfortunately, sometimes in these highly toxic dynamics, we have to actually let people know what we need, which of course can be tough when our needs have been denied in our relationship for so long.
Yes, and our sense of trust and self is diminished, and we don't trust ourselves, let alone others. And it is taking those small steps, deciding to start to choose what bread you want at the bread shop, and trust yourself with tiny things, little decisions, and know that what you're experiencing has a source, and this is perfectly normal, though it's not normal, and the fact that it's not normal is also good to recognise that you don't have to stay that way, be that way. You can become stronger and go back to the you once knew. A lot of people describe coming out of a toxic relationship is that I don't even know who I am now, what I've become, or I feel like a shell version, and so it's about you can get back to the you that you were at the very least, if not a much 2.0 version.
Yes.
And it's sort of comforting to know that those sort of symptoms are normal, even though they're not normal. And that it's really about meeting yourself where you are, in the sense of being, the worst thing is when people give you an anecdote or a happy quote or an affirmation, and you're sitting here and hearing something that's so far away from where you are. It can be counterproductive, and it's like just making peace and being okay with where you are. And from where you are, if making a decision is, picking a meal in a restaurant and not changing your mind and being really happy with it, if that's where that rebuilding of trust and that calibration of what's right for you starts, perfect. And building on that until they become bigger and bigger decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a good sort of place to start, and it's being aware that mixed feelings through the process are actually perfectly normal. It's really okay to have both simultaneous relief for being out of that dynamic and still having feelings of love and missing certain aspects of our partner, because there's every chance, especially if they're very skilled, it's not all bad, and it's okay that there's certain parts of them that because what you sometimes find is once you open up to the story and then you say to someone, oh, well, I'm really missing them, and they go, what? How could you miss them? And it's understanding that actually that is a perfectly normal part of the process. That's why you need to find, as well as you say, start small and build big, that you get people who are educated in these things as to how to support you effectively, that you are going to go through a whole range of emotions. You might find that the anger comes later because it wasn't safe at the time, so you're going to have to work your way through that. It is going to take it, and again, sometimes, not putting a time frame on it or comparing yourself to other people, it takes as long as it takes. You may find that there's aspects where you go through, how could I have done this to myself, and it's okay. If we didn't know what we didn't know, we did the best we could with what we kind of had, and then you are exploring more and more potentially rituals to engage in that help you to start to come back to center, help you to stabilize, whether that's kind of eating in ways that make you feel clear and fresh and healthy, or whether that's an exercise routine, things like yoga. And you might have to try a few things because, again, we're all different, and what brings peace, recovery and centeredness to one person, for somebody else might have a minimal sense of return or none at all. It doesn't mean that that process is wrong. It just might not be the one for you. But it's the willingness to keep exploring until you do find those approaches that work for you. And as long as you continue with it and you're not trying to rush yourself, that you have that compassion to meet yourself where you are, I think those are very important things.
Yeah, absolutely. And to know that fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses and emotions, residue, are a natural consequence of coming out of a toxic relationship. So you will have shock, despair, anger, resentment, a sense of being wronged. What is a better word for that?
Yeah.
Deception.
Yeah.
Disbelief, and then that'll go in cycles, and and a lot of people sort of describe having relentless thoughts.
Yep, the hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance, exactly.
You kind of find it difficult to settle anywhere, or can't settle for too long without.
Or find yourself drifting when you're meant to be somewhere else, or in the middle of a task, and all that is normal, and may not be something that happens after a healthy breakup. And so, but it's definitely there post a toxic breakup, and so it's something that it needs to be addressed, and sometimes gets overlooked when it comes to healing from a healthy breakup. Because most advice you get is just return to the things that make you feel good, go out with your friends, do all that stuff, re-engage in hobbies, and they're all fantastic ways to reconnect with self and to start to feel great and fill yourself up. However, there's undeniable damage that has been intentionally inflicted that needs a different level of care and healing method or technology, if you will, and that is not as fun, but very rewarding.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's a big topic, and we could certainly keep talking on about this, but that might be a nice place to kind of bring this episode to a close. But if you are in that recovery process, watch your inner critic too. You've just really is about finding the nurture, the compassion, and the patience, and the love for yourself to let yourself recover. And we wish you all the best on your journey. And if you're somebody who's supporting someone on this journey, be kind. Hold the space for them. They will bounce backwards and forwards, and it's just about holding the space and letting them come back into their own thinking, rather than resist the urge to think for them and tell them what to do, because that's what they've just come out of, even though we've got a good intent, but that doesn't necessarily help people reground and start to think for themselves again. And that ideally is the biggest gift we can give one another. And as you say, we're not judging, we're meeting with compassion, and empathy can help a lot.
And even as you said, to build on that, something you might say is, how do you feel? What would you suggest if someone else was in asking for this advice? And just start to help them to realise that they have answers too, and that they have value to add, and that they're experts in their own right, and their opinion matters, and they have one. It might have just been quietened for a while.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, PJ, as always.
Thank you.
Love our conversation.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us for this episode. And thank you for spending your time watching this episode. And if you found it helpful, please let others know if somebody you could think of that it would be of service to. And subscribe also too. Be very grateful to the Sean Healy Relationship Resourcing Series. This particular conversation series between PJ and myself, we're going to be doing a number of these, so we very much hope you'll join us on another episode at some stage. And again, we might even revisit this topic given it's so large. So we'll see how we go. But apart from that, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
And till next time.
Bye.
Bye.